Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive in 5 podcast. I hope you are doing okay and are having a fab day so far. Just wanted to share a bit of a crazy milestone that we have hit. Also, apologize for any background noise, my dog just grumbled underneath my feet. This is a very professionally produced podcast, as you can tell. We just hit a crazy milestone this week. I've just realised that this is not only my 30-second episode, which feels like a lot. I feel like I've must have talked a lot to do 32 episodes. But also, we hit 150 downloads on the podcast. So thank you. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for subscribing. I really, really appreciate that you want to listen to me chat away. Speaking of which, today I wanted to tell you a little story about how I used to handle a stressful day and why it maybe wasn't the worst thing in the world, despite the fact that a lot of people might tell you the way I handled stress was really, really bad. Now, obviously, we all have stressful days. We all have things that create stress in our lives. Work stress, life stress. We might have good stress. We might have bad stress. I can honestly say the most stressful period in my life was when we were having our kitchen renovated. It was about 3 years ago now. And not only was I working 2 jobs, I was coaching and I was also working full time. And it was hell. I don't know how we got through it. It was genuinely awful. I love my kitchen now. It's a great result at the end. Like, it was all worth it. But living through it, my God, it was stressful. Would not recommend. Well, I would. Having a nice kitchen's nice, but God, it was stressful. But how I used to handle stress of any kind when I was in my corporate life in particular was, as I'd kind of learned to deal with anything hard, I'd go to things that made me feel good. When work was stressful, the first thing that I would always do if I had a stressful day, I remember one particularly stressful day where I was working in a role as a chief of staff and we suddenly got told we had a regulatory submission that was required for my boss. And we literally had like 24 hours to turn this thing around and it required so much work. And the first thing I thought when that stress hit was, what can I eat? Like, what can I have to eat? What would normally happen if I was having a stressful period at work is the first thing I would do I would plan like a nice lunch spot to go to. I worked at a place in the city where there were lots of good lunch spots all around us, and often like street food markets, or there was a really good like chicken Kiev spot, which I'm sure is closed now. There was this amazing Vietnamese sandwich place. I'm making myself hungry just saying this. And that's the first thing I would do is if I came in and I realised how stressful my day was going to be, I would think, how can I make it a little bit better by going out for a nice lunch, by rewarding myself somehow with some food. That was the first thing that I would think about. Or I would just go to Pret, and rather than just buying my usual sandwich, I would buy like a bag of popcorn and a Love Bar, and I'd get some chocolate. And I'd get some of the dried mango, and I'd just pick up stuff. I would just want to have more and more food. Or on the way home from work, if I hadn't eaten very much because it was that busy, I would go to Smith's and I wouldn't just buy like a cereal bar or something. I would buy a massive bag of Maltesers and a big family pack of crisps and a full fat Coke, and I would just put all these calories into my shopping cart. And that was tended to be how I dealt with stress primarily. The first thing I would do is think food. The other thing I used to do was stress shop. It was almost a compulsion if I'd had a bad day that I would go shopping. Where I worked was right over the road from, again, a lot of it's closed now, but it was right over the road from One New Chain shopping centre, which had like, at that point, like a Banana Republic and a Mango, and I think it had a Reese and all sorts of other shopping places. And I would go and just buy stuff. I bought so many tops in Banana Republic after stressful days. Or I would go online shopping. I would get on the train home and just add stuff to my basket and have deliveries arriving and almost forget what I'd ordered. Sometimes, and this is actually a bit weird, but I would literally be driving home from work and I would pull into the supermarket to walk around and just buy something. Sometimes it was food, sometimes it was like books or like cutlery. It was almost like the process of acquiring things made me feel better. Spending money suddenly made me kind of go, okay. And the other thing I would do is I would drink. Now, this wasn't to excess usually. It wasn't like I needed a drink. I just want to clarify, I was not an alcoholic. I didn't need a drink. But if I had a stressful day, I would often end up in the pub after work with my colleagues, with my team. That was something that happened quite a lot. And I think it was something that was culturally quite prevalent in banking at the time, that we would you would go for a drink because it was almost like a way of switching off, a way of connecting, etc. But I'd also come home from work and open a bottle of wine and just have a glass while I was cooking, almost as a way of like, okay, and breathe. If I went out for dinner midweek and I was a bit stressed or uptight, I'd have a couple of drinks. on a Friday night, I needed a glass of wine to unwind. It wasn't like I wanted it, I needed it to switch off. So yeah, those are the 3 things that I used to do. I would eat, I would shop, and I would drink. And there is a good reason why I did all those things. And through a bit of work that I've done myself, I know why I did these things. The food one 100% goes back to my childhood. I've always been a foodie. I've always loved food. And a lot of that comes from the fact that I grew up in a house where food was always there. And my mum was a very good cook. She still is a very good cook. Food was always a way that we showed affection. We'd always have like Sunday dinners together. Food was a big part of my life, baking and cooking and all of those things. Food was full of a lot of happy memories for me. I also went to boarding school, so food was always something that reminded me of home. I had a little like box of food that I used to take back to school with me every week that had like food from home, so things that I wanted to have rather than school food. And eating that was always a way of comforting me when I was homesick. So food for me has always been associated with being safe and being protected. And so when I am stressed, it makes sense that my brain goes, food, because it's a way of going, no, it's okay, like we're okay. It's my brain trying to protect me. Equally, shopping. I had learned that shopping made me feel good. Shopping was something I would do as a treat after I'd done well at something. When I was little, my mum would take me shopping as a bit of a treat. You know, going out for a day shopping was something that was a treat. So in my brain, my brain goes, well, if we want to do well at something, let's buy something and we can jump ahead to the reward. And with alcohol, it literally switched my brain off. As someone who is a bit type A, my brain always feels like it's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I always feel like I have a very intense, like, internal monologue going. And that sounds like a lot to admit here, but do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've always got a lot of thoughts, a lot of things going around my head. Alcohol literally helps my brain to switch off. It helps me to silence that monologue for a little bit. And I'm going to say something that might surprise you, I guess, but there is nothing wrong with any of these things. There is nothing wrong with eating to soothe your emotions. There is nothing wrong with drinking to soothe your emotions. There's nothing wrong with shopping to soothe your emotions. They are all legitimate coping mechanisms. And how do I know that? Because I'm still here. I survived. If those coping mechanisms hadn't worked, then I would be in a very different place. I would probably be, I don't know, I don't know if I'd be here if I hadn't, to be honest, the stress got so intense sometimes that actually I don't know whether I would have hung around. It was that stressful. So the fact those coping mechanisms, you know, the fact that they did their job because I'm still here, in my brain's view, they worked. And there are worse coping mechanisms too, like having a glass of wine after a stressful day, going into Banana Republic and buying a t-shirt, eating a chicken Kiev for lunch. That's not equivalent to snorting coke or watching inappropriate pornography or going to an underground fight club to get beaten up every night. There are far worse coping mechanisms. But the fact is, they weren't helping me long term. Something that I see a lot with the ladies that I coach is that they have very high stress levels. It's the nature of being a professional woman, nature of having a career is that your stress levels tend to be high. But often what happens is the solutions to those stress levels are very short-termist. They work, but they aren't getting you out of the hole. They're just allowing the hole not to get any deeper. Because the fact is, whilst they might allow you to keep moving forward or stay afloat, they're not fixing the underlying problem. And one of the underlying things that is driving that stress, which is being overweight, being unhappy, not being in a great routine, not being able to take care of yourself. And when you can fix those things, the work stress doesn't go away. I'll be honest, like you're still going to have work stress. Life is still going to be stressful, but you can be in a place to better handle all of that and for that not to be such a massive thing. And if you can find different ways of coping with those stress levels that don't exacerbate problems outside of the things that are stressful, you can feel a whole lot better. So we think about stress a little bit differently at the TFP, and I'm going to tell you why tomorrow. On that cliffhanger, I'm going to leave that there. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will chat to you tomorrow.